Thank you so much for joining us on the Voice of Job Seekers. I'm your host, Mark. If you want to know more information about the podcast, you can go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com. You can even leave a voicemail there. Press the send voicemail button on the right to activate your computer, laptop, microphone. And then you just leave a message right there. Just make it real easy for you. In the meantime, I want to introduce to you Jennifer Rock and Michael Voss, who are the authors of BS Incorporated, which is, I describe it as a satire on today's working world, painfully truthful parody on corporate culture. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Well, thank you. And I was shockingly surprised at how good this book was. And reading the short bit I read, I plan to finish it. And I hope that I can convince at least a few of my listeners to also pick up the book at the store. Or they can easily order it on Amazon, by the way. So if you don't mind, Jennifer, if you could provide a little background of the book to at least a shorter version of your best spiel there.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So BS Incorporated is the story of a big, dumb Midwestern company, but very well-meaning company that is spiraling out of control. And there's a group of middle managers that we take you behind the scenes to meet, and they are muddling through the bureaucracy and the jargon and the day-to-day absurdity of the company they work for. And they're dealing with these consultants and people who are trying to take over the company. And eventually these middle managers, these quirky, great middle managers, realize that they might be the only ones who can save this company from themselves.
So is it based on your experience in the corporate world, or at least as an eyewitness to some degree?
Absolutely. It is based loosely on both Jennifer's and my corporate experience. We have a combined 40 years of experience working in corporate America as communications professionals. Our paths crossed at Best Buy's headquarters, which is here in the Minneapolis area. Mm-hmm. We worked there together for 12 years. So while this is not the story of Best Buy, we certainly gleaned a lot of stories and a lot of situations from that time, as well as things that we've experienced in our other jobs along the way, and then even layered in a few stories that we've heard from friends and colleagues over happy hour.
Now, it's interesting that you're, and maybe I use parody in the wrong sense, but then again, there is some truth twisting in order to keep the names and faces innocent, right?
Yes, we certainly have changed the names and some of the situations to protect the not so innocent.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess they wouldn't be so innocent as much as they would be perpetrators.
That's right.
But it does. It made me, to some degree, even in the first few pages, I automatically went back to the companies that I onboarded with and started with and realized how back then, a long time ago, that, nobody really researched the companies. We just imagined if they were still floating, all was good. But as your book kind of shows us, and as we see today, that is so far from the truth and so wrong path to take.
That's really true, Mark, and that's one of the things we really wanted to illustrate and highlight with this book is what it's like to join a company when you really don't quite understand what it's like to be on the inside, and that's why we had one of our main characters, Anna, join the company, and right away, very early on in the book, you meet Anna, and it's her first day on the job, and it is like jumping on a speeding train, and everybody speaking a foreign language that she doesn't understand because of all the acronyms and the jargon. And we hear from our readers that that's a really universal experience, especially in big companies today.
Absolutely. It was my experience. everybody throws all these acronyms at you, and then you kind of expect to catch up right away. But for Anna, I remember how, I mean, her experience went from 0 to 60 all in one day. She was hired on with impression for one position, and right away she ends up in a completely different position that nobody really knew what it was.
Right. And, I have to say that that experience, although exaggerated a little bit, is ripped right from my own career. So early on in my career, joining a great big crazy company, I had a first day that was, triple booked meetings. I never got to see a desk. I was carrying my bag with me and my coat with me the entire day and being dragged from meeting to meeting. And I kept half a notebook filled with all these things I didn't understand. And at some point, an hour left of the day, and my new boss leaned over to me during a meeting and whispered, "Please don't quit." And so we wanted to get that across that, again, like Mike said, it's a universal experience. It's tough joining a new company. You don't even know where the restrooms are, much less how you're going to tackle this new job. And we wanted to get that experience across to people and let people know that they're not alone.
Yeah. Now, a decent onboarding experience is going to be half that speed, right? Or maybe even 25% of that speed. I mean, to go from meeting to meeting on your first day with no orientation, not even meeting your coworkers that you'll be sitting next to, makes it a very, almost a hostile situation.
That's absolutely true. And you're right. The companies that do it well, they start you in an orientation, whether that's for a few days or some I know do even a full week. Hopefully they ease you into the work and they introduce you to the right people and give you time to have coffee with key colleagues and leaders and things like that. But those are the best companies, and there are an awful lot of companies who don't quite understand that, or they just fall into the trap of being so busy, and I can't wait to get this person in and take some work off my own plate, so I'm going to throw him or her right into the fire and in an attempt to try and use them as a life preserver for myself.
Yeah, I bet you get a lot of side-eyed looks from the companies you guys consult with.
I'll be honest, that was a consideration when we published this book of wanting to make sure that our clients understand that we have a lot of good things to say about jobs and corporate America as well. This certainly was like you said, bordering on satire in terms of the novel that we wrote. But we do have nothing but respect for the companies that we worked with and for, and there've been a lot of them of all sizes. But I have to say, you know what? No matter where you work, you got to deal with some amount of BS in your job, and that's really where our novel came from.
Right, and Michael, I bet you've heard a lot of confessions too, right?
We have heard a lot of confessions, and what we hear very often is ideas for book two. Oh, you need to capture this and put this one in book two. So people love to share their stories of the craziest things they've encountered. And Jennifer mentioned filling up a notebook. We have several notebooks and several electronic documents on our computers with ideas, suggestions, and stories from readers and friends and colleagues and clients that we run into on a day-to-day basis.
Now, Jennifer, what is one story that you can tell without revealing names and companies that really kind of shows how unprepared companies are when they are bringing somebody on board for the first time?
Wow, that is a great question, and I'm gonna take it actually one step further back, if you don't mind, Mark.
Not a problem.
And talk about the job interview process.
Yes,
because
please do. Thank you.
I know a lot of your a lot of your listeners are in an interview process. They're job seekers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about my own experience as a hiring manager. So between Mike and myself, we have hired a lot of people over the years and interviewed a lot of candidates. And one of the stories that popped up into my head was a candidate who was well qualified, very sharp, I was going to hire somebody for my communications team. And he sat across from me and was confident and smart about his resume. And he asked me a great question. And I love when interviewees ask me questions.
Sure.
And he asked me, so we had 170,000 employees across the world in this company. Most of them were in stores. And he asked how I communicated to all of those store employees. They're tough to reach. So I outlined basically the strategy that we had for reaching these employees. And the candidate listened very thoughtfully and nodded his head and then told me what I was doing was absolutely wrong. And then he outlined everything that he would do instead and why I was approaching my job completely incorrectly. And it was so bold and so crazy. And all I kept on thinking in my head is somewhere along the line, no one trained this lovely candidate on coming on too strong to his hiring manager.
Right.
And so even as I was listening to him speak, I was physically crossing his name out on the list in front of me and thinking, sweetie, that's a great story and you've got lots of ideas, but, don't start off our experience by telling me why I'm bad at my job.
Yeah, I think common sense would have told him that, but obviously he had other things in mind. But interviewing is one of the toughest parts of any experience in a job, because really most people are expecting to be scrutinized and to have a magnifying glass put on their experience, and with the wrong mindset, they cancel themselves out.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a tough experience for both the hiring manager and the candidate. I'd say it's very stressful.
It is very stressful, and for a long time, I hired people, interviewed tons of folks, and very often I got to the point to where I had to be a lot more prepared. But nobody told me I had to be prepared. Somebody just put a sheet of a list of questions in front of me, say, ask them these. And it's like, I'm not going to ask them all of these. Some of these questions were ridiculous, which, they didn't cover the candidate. It covered their ideal candidate and how they would answer it. And it was obviously sometimes somewhat biased to a great degree. In you guys, and maybe Mike, you can answer that question about perhaps the book is a good way of really laying out how biased we are throughout the whole experience.
Yeah, I can completely see where you're coming from there, because we certainly highlight some situations in which people carry certain biases about themselves or about other people for the most part. And certainly the character of Anna that we mentioned earlier really presents herself a certain way, but also I think act to Anna and how they believe she is a certain type of person, and she might not be that way. Now, of course, that can happen in the interview process. That can happen when you start in a job. That can even happen when you've been in a role for years. If you
Sure.
don't take the time to really try to get to know people on a personal level, to your point about using a canned list of questions versus having a conversation with someone and understanding who they are and what makes them tick and whether they'd be a good fit for your team and your culture and your company, you can really miss out on some good people, and you can swing and miss and hire somebody who isn't a great fit. So we just think it's really important to have that at any stage along the way in the working environment.
Yeah. I think one of the things I picked up in the book is everybody has all these assumptions that they're working with. You're assuming that somebody's going to stay, is going to come back for a second day by harassing them and making them feel uncomfortable the first day.
Right. No, it's a good point, and we operate under so many assumptions in the work environment, and I think it's, we all bring those to the table, and yeah, like Mike said, you can miss out on a lot of good relationships and good people that way. And one of the things we incorporated was the idea that you can find your crew, you can find your work family, when you join a company, and you find those people who have your back no matter what, and that's such an important part of the work environment.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't kind of bring your whole self to work and show your personality and connect with the people that you work with and spend so much time with, you do miss out on that. And these are lifelong friendships and a network of people who support you no matter where you go, and it's important.
Oh, absolutely. I think to the point where I think Anna was trying not to be personal, but
Right.
it's almost impossible not to if you plan to live with somebody for 8 hours a day plus, and trying to keep to yourself. That's nearly impossible mission. In fact, you eventually show yourself good or bad, and most people pick up the bad first, wouldn't you say?
No, that's exactly right, and that's why it's a mistake to be guarded or to try and present yourself in a certain way rather than just being authentic. And again, it's that bias sort of runs both ways. If certainly there are people who can make assumptions about you and who will make assumptions about you based on any set of characteristics, but you're not helping them if you are not being true to yourself.
This is true, and I think you're kind of always researching the company, trying to find out what makes the company tick and what makes the people around you tick. You kind of fail and you kind of spiral down once you stop being curious about the people and how you can be a part in being a solution to wherever you are.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, it's especially when you're interviewing a candidate and bringing them on board to a company, it's a tough thing to try to measure. But if you can find those candidates who are both adaptable and curious, that will, who love to learn and who will, take on new challenges. I mean, that's a really strong type of person to bring onto your company. And you don't get that if you give them the standard list of questions. You're not going to root out those people who are going to be those curious ones who end up adapting well to your culture.
Sure. It's sort of like trying to date and almost marry someone that just only looks good instead of trying to understanding who they are. And I think I think we get caught up in that, and that's the way we approach work, at least ideally at first, until we realize that, wow, this person has a lot more substance. I don't necessarily like them, but at least I know what I don't. At least I know what I don't like now.
And you know what? That works both ways too, though, because people look at companies that way too.
Yes.
Just what's on the outside, and that's one of the things we had in our novel as well. Is that if you just read the press releases and the news articles that are kind of the varnished version of what the company wants you to know about them, you're not going to realize really what they're about, what makes them tick and what they're about on the inside. So that really comes from talking to people and people who stories about the company, and that's how you really decide if this is a relationship worth pursuing.
Well, I plan to finish the book. It's called BS Incorporated. And it's a fictional company, so don't go try to Google it, and you'll just find the book.
That's funny.
Is there anything coming up that we should know about the book, or anything that you might be doing through the media that we can watch and maybe learn more about you?
Well, we are continuing to do our publicity tour on a lot of podcasts and radio shows, much like yours here, Mark. And we are starting to work on the follow-up to BS Incorporated. So we're going to take you back to Business Solutions Incorporated, back with Will and Anna and the rest of the gang, and we're going to pick up where we left off with this story. And we have a lot of readers who are clamoring for it. So you can look for that follow-up early next year.
Excellent. And again, this is a great lesson on what perhaps a lot of job seekers can learn about corporate culture before they step into the front door when they first begin. And well as many other lessons that we could probably dive into, but we won't have time. So, Jennifer, Rock, Michael Voss, thank you very much for coming on the Voice of Job Seekers.
Thank you so much for having us.
We really appreciate it.
Sure. And for the rest of you, thank you very much for joining us. And we'll be back next week with another show. Peace in the Valley of Love. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week.